Okay, so Kyle, what we were going to do this time is tap into your question on the psychological development of maybe wrestlers or maybe different systems that could be used, and how. I mean, there was a question you had on sports psych and the mental side of wrestling.
Yeah. So this is this is the third recording on long-term athlete development,
Right, right.
and we outlined some testing and guidelines for sports for general fitness conditioning, sports specific guidelines. Then we also discussed some of the long-term planning and mostly physiological training. So now we want to discuss the psychological aspect of long-term athlete development, right?
Yeah, and there's so we're gonna look at maybe some things that were done maybe in the former Soviet Union and what Russian athletes go through, and then discuss maybe some research and systems for mental toughening and mental toughness, because wrestling is one of the, if you know, it's up there as one of the most difficult sports mentally. It's a physical combat, just a grueling sport. So mental toughness is definitely going to be a big component for a wrestler. So I'll start out just by talking a little bit about some current research that came out a few years ago that was kind of groundbreaking here in the United States by Dr. Angela Duckworth. And are you familiar, Kyle, with the grit scores? And so I'll just mention a little bit of it because I think that there's some benefit to understanding this one way or the other. But Duckworth kind of cracked the code on West Point cadets. So dealing with West Point cadets, um, there's a large percentage who don't get through the rigors of West Point. They're top notch academic students. They come with the highest recommendations. They've been civil servants throughout their adolescence. They work in the communities. In order to get into West Point, it's very difficult, as you guys both know. So they did all kinds of psychological profiling and tests to try to determine, how many of these individuals would be able to stay or stay through it. And all the different tests, they never were able to crack the code. And so what she developed is what's called a grit score, GRIT, grit. Grit meaning like your toughness. And what she was able to determine based on pre-testing these individuals who will last and who will quit. So first one to be able to determine this. So with a simple psychological profile, she accurately can determine who's going to be able to tough it out. And the grit score, grit equals passion plus persistence, meaning this. So the two things you have to measure are one's passion towards that, okay, and then their persistence, meaning their willingness to keep coming. They're very persistent, and that comes from experiences. So, for example, if you want someone to be a good wrestler, if they aren't passionate and they don't like the sport of wrestling, their passion score is going to be low. They're not going to be able to be, if they don't like it, they don't enjoy it, they don't love it, it's going to be very, very difficult. So someone has to be developed in a way that they learn long-term. Athletic development should focus on weaning, the gradualism. They got to learn to love the what they're doing because the more passion I have towards it, the more likely I'll stay in. Then the persistence can be taught, you know, obviously with young individuals, and over time, and there's got to be a gradual approach to that too. But that comes with experiences, and the more experiences you have, that you learn to be able to, your threshold gets higher as to not giving up, as to be able to stay in longer because you gain confidence through those experiences. You develop that persistence. So basically, through her questionnaires, she developed a way to find out a score of the passion and persistence of individuals, and then they get a grit score. The higher the grit score, the more likely that they would stay with it and have success. So that's an interesting new development that I think needs to be discussed a little bit. And I want to get your take on that, Peter, as far as, and I think it all makes sense to you as the athletes that are being developed in the Russian systems in the sports schools. Was that already something that was known and that was being worked on in the long-term athletic development programs, that you're going like, yeah, this is common sense, we knew this?
Well, it has been integrated more than anywhere else probably. And this again is coming from the East. It's integrated into the pedagogical process of coaching, and also into this basic tests. If you look at, again, tests, GTO tests, they have a knowledge component. How much of love for the sport, love for the purpose of participating, and how much of perhaps historical traditions as values and patriotism can be used as a psychological strengthening tool, depends on very much on a level of education and a level of competences, skills and abilities of the coaches, and reliance on a high level of education of coaches has been the main kind of focus of East European system of sport in general, and psychological preparation has been part of it. So I'd say, if you look again at Eastern combat methods like Taekwondo, there is in their regular testing process, there is a knowledge test. You have to know certain things. Through this knowledge and through constant pedagogical work, participants are being strengthened psychologically. For example, some clubs work with parents, and they ask parents to fill in a survey about behavior of their children who are participating in Eastern combat methods. So coaches demand not only obedience to parents, but all other good qualities. And part of this triangle, participant, coach, parent, this communication where parents complete the satisfaction survey, give it to coaches, and coach works with kids on points that parents consider weak, is the integrated process of not only developing each participant physically, but developing them morally. So moral development and high morals are the foundation of this psychological strength. What gives you psychological strength, as we see in current performance of many national teams who receive much more money playing for their professional teams, right? But for ironically, they cannot perform as well for money as they could when moral obligations, if you wish, and Kantian kind of motives, which means I'm doing this not because it's good, not for me, but because I must do it for my community, for my town, for my region, for my country, and that's where the psychological strength comes from traditionally in Eastern European upbringing of each participant. So you have so coach's responsibility is to work with you, to talk to you all the time, not only about your physical preparation, but your obligations to the parents, obligations to the community, obligations to your country when you are at the high level of performance, and relate all this to your ability and your responsibility to do your best, not to give up. And that's the foundation, that's the starting point. And then after that, the next level is to develop self motivation and self control, self regulation, so that it then becomes your habit and becomes your nature to give the best at every tournament you participate, but give also the best at every training session, and that becomes your religion, if you wish. That becomes your everyday goal, is to give the best. And that's where traditionally in the East, probably more than in the West, athletes would find that psychological strength. Yeah, but then what you do technically is your visualization, autogenic training, we call it. Well, when you simulate your competitive activities in your mind with closed eyes, with half dreaming, then going to lucid dreaming, programming yourself for training in your mind while you're sleeping, which is probably the fringe that is going to be next. And hypnosis, self-hypnosis is this.
So what I want to get into, Peter, I think we need a fourth session, because the fourth session of this topic would be the visualization, autogenic training, hypnosis, self-hypnosis, some of these tactics, and then we could maybe talk more about and give some examples. But I think if we go back a little bit here, and I want to comment on a couple points that you made. Okay. One, two main points, okay? The political component. So when you threw that word out, because you were talking about, so I want to tie that in with the passion, okay? And I think that maybe deserves a little bit more discussion, but if it's integrated in, it's something bigger than just you or money or anything like this. And this is being taught in with these kids, is you're doing something great for your country. And I want to give an example of that because I have a good friend that I used to coach who was with the Minnesota Wild, Filip Kuba from he was born in Ostrava, Czech Republic, and he was in a sports school for hockey.
Mhm.
And he played 18 years professional hockey in the United States.
Mhm.
Great player. And I was always fascinated with Kuba, and I'd always ask questions about his sports school development because it was top notch. He was a beautiful athlete. Everything he could do so well, like he'd run so smooth versus other athletes that didn't come out of that system, the sports school systems. The Canadians, and I don't want to get into the Canadians versus the Eastern Europeans, but he could run better. His jumping mechanics, beautiful. His mobility, his flexibility, better. Like the things that he could do with his body were just so much more graceful. Okay, but then he explained to me the two greatest times of his entire life. So I'm going to jump to another part of what you were talking about: moral versus monetary. Just crazy, because so when you're telling me these stories, Kuba used to tell me the highlights of his career that meant more to him than anything. He won a gold medal in 2001 for the Czech Republic in the Olympics. Best feeling he's ever had. It was the greatest celebrations, the most fun. It meant more to him. 18 years in the NHL, 18 years. Unbelievable career, made a lot of money. Okay, a lot of money. But the gold medal that he won, and then the bronze medal in 2006, those were highlights. So you talk about the patriotism, which builds the passion, okay, which is really coinciding with the grit score that we're talking about, which I think is very interesting to me. But that's being integrated. He came out of a similar system than that you would have been being developed in, and so I think that I just think that's amazing, because when we look at this grit score concept and what you were saying, it makes sense to me.
Yeah, and for wrestlers, I think for wrestlers, it's a very important, critically important tool. The camaraderie that they have, and that is created by coaches, and team spirit. Americans are very good at it. Subliminally, they are doing it for their athletes. Athletes have very strong subconscious pride. Well, explicit also, but they have no doubt that they are the best. You see, that is built by partly by political and patriotic strength of the country in general, and many communities in particular. And if you look at how the Americans are winning now, in many cases they're winning psychologically rather than physically. When they beat Russians are so weak now because they lost the Soviet Union
Yeah.
pride and the Soviet Union confidence. Okay,
Wow.
there is no doubt among American team, and there was no doubt among members of the Soviet Union team that they're the best and they're gonna win.
That's
So,
interesting.
okay,
I love this.
there is absence of doubt is probably the most critical psychological condition that brings you into the zone without any disruptions, without any any negativity. You're enjoying it, and you are fully embracing any problems, any pain, anything, any negative influences, because you have no doubt that you're the best and you deserve to be number one at any competition, whatever. So what happens if you look at Russian team now? It is becoming a little bit better because in past 10 years or after year 2000, somehow slowly, periodically, this confidence comes in. There are some points of pride and success at political level, geopolitical dimension, if you wish, and that has great influence. But athletes, let's say Russian athletes, were making much more than Soviet Union athletes did, perform a lot worse. And just because of this, there is no psychological motivation.
Wow.
And as you said, the monetary motivation.
That's an amazing point.
Is so weak compared to what your patriotic and political motivation can give you, that it costs the current Russian team most of the losses for psychological reasons. So,
and that psychological reason, I think, is boils down to that one component: passion plus persistence. The passion is lost without the development of, like you said, the political and moral foundation. Is amazing. I just think that that's a great point. And so you're seeing it because you follow the Russian athletes, and you're going, that you were brought up when they were the Soviet athletes, and it's different.
yeah, and the coaches are, and it's now just bickering about money rather than not worrying at all about money, not worrying about anything, and just having it was so easy for coaches because they are given this subliminal motivation to their athletes by default, that they are competing for their team of the USSR team.
Wow.
And communities that had opportunity to qualify their athletes for the national team had the same motivation, the level of pride that you're going to have when you compete for the national team cannot be compared with any kind of money. And yeah, there are a lot of examples when
Gosh, that's
how some of the best performances. Look at the recent what Maradona did when he when he performed, and he was politically a very outspoken person. So political reasons for his motivation were very, very visible. Explicitly, he stated why he wins. He wins for his country to demonstrate, say, political dominance against another country that he thought treated his country unfairly. So he performed at his peak, or beyond any imaginable peaks. Some of the best performances in soccer history, when he indicated he did it for political reasons. so this when we talk about wrestling, it's critical for coaches to be for wrestling coaches to be able to integrate high morals, community belonging, values of community, and patriotism into the upbringing and development of athletes throughout many years of their progression from first steps towards high performance. And it's not just that you play an anthem at competitions. It's regularly. It is everyday effort of a coach, when you integrate into your talks, when you speak to your athletes, what's right, what's wrong, not what's good and what's bad, but what's right and what's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Money is good. No money is bad. That's irrelevant. But what's right and what's wrong, that's important. What's what is fair, what is unfair, is critically important. So when you talk about anti-doping measures, that's where the measures start. Without this coaches talking about right and wrong, and doping being part of this, fair, unfair, and teaching every wrestler not to use their skills on the streets for any purposes that might not be right. This is an example of what needs to be done every day. Maybe every hour coaches spend with athletes, teaching them what's right, what's wrong, what's moral, what's immoral, and that gives them the foundation for their psychological strength. And tests. I think tests from, say, Taekwondo clubs are using tests. You can use tests more and more, and I think our dilemma is how we add some knowledge and some psychological kind of criteria and measurements to the tests. We discussed how now we have conditioning tests for every age, from kids to 70 plus, from younger than 6 to 70 plus. So how you organically integrate moral issues into the tests, and these moral issues, how we make them more useful for psychological stability of participants.
And Peter,
That's-
so what because I know Kyle had limited time here today, but that's what's nice about it. I didn't see it until right now or towards the beginning of this. What we're doing is going over a macro level, and then maybe the next time at the micro level, individual things that can be done, but you're painting a great picture at the macro level of how this should be thought of and integrated for the development of these athletes. And I just think it's awesome. I hope Kyle. I want to go back and I wrote a quote down. This might singly be the best sports psychology quote I've ever heard in my life for an athlete. The absence of doubt is the most critical psychological condition. And I don't know if you wrote that down, but I love it. I love it. The absence of doubt is the most critical psychological condition. I've never heard anyone put it that. I mean, that's just concise. That is sports psychology right there. That's the number one thing. If you can eliminate doubt, you can do anything. It's if you believe, and that's just a great. That was just awesome. So I know he had only 45 minutes today. The one thing I want to throw in real quick, just, and I know Peter, you'll, because of fitness and health and currently what's going on, and I may have mentioned to you this, but so there was a 1940 in the United States at Harvard University treadmill test in 1940. And this goes with the persistence. They took 130 sophomores, various backgrounds and whatnot. A lot of them, you know, different levels as far as their IQ, and they looked at all these different tests. They followed these people throughout their whole lives after they did this one test at Harvard in 1940, and it was a treadmill test. Simple test. They had a very steep grade, and it's walking on a treadmill. How fast will people quit? Just walking, like walking up a mountain, you know, walking. If they could last 5 minutes or beyond, the ones who last 5 minutes or beyond had the most successful lives. No tests that they could do all through their college career determined, number one, life satisfaction, two, visits to psychiatrists and psychologists, how long they stay with a marriage so they didn't get divorced, there's 6 sick days, career advancement, promotion, and income. The number one thing that predicted their futures in life of all the testing was the treadmill. Okay, so this is the persistence. So that's brought on through experiences. It's the only thing. And I'm just going to tell you something that just happened to me last week on the stress test on the treadmill. The lady who was doing, you know, does these every day. She says 20-year-olds that they're taking through quit earlier than 80, 90-year-old men. Okay. And she said, some of them, they quit because you can quit anytime. It's not you can quit before you get to your maximal heart rate. Anytime you feel uncomfortable, you can just say, I'm done, touch the red button, and you're done. She said, you would be shocked how many young people today quit after 20 seconds. 20 seconds, they quit. But if their lifestyle is sitting playing video games all day long and never pushing themselves, they're just getting beyond resting heart rate, and it scares them. As I said, they're not getting to their maximal heart rate. She said, not even close. So experience obviously makes a huge difference in your persistence and your ability to keep pushing. But it's a sad state when she said almost every time 80-year-old and 90-year-old men will beat some of these 20-year-olds. It's crazy. So, I mean, it's just, obviously our culture has changed and people are not exercising as much, and that's obviously your background and you understand that. But I think that's an interesting point to be made, as far as this psychological component of experience and gradually building experiences. Because if you don't have it, you quit early. You just quit.
Yeah. So yeah, what high performance coaches are telling me is that it's becoming very difficult or more difficult to get persistent athletes on the team because life has become and continues to become easier and easier. So you're right that the physical difficulties are probably the most important starting point in the development of psychological strength. Without it, automatically, if you cannot grab Uber and you have to walk, right?
Yeah.
Home, walk 5 miles. Right, you're developing your psychological strength, not only your physical strength.
Yeah.
If you don't have all these experiences, if you can get food straight away, if you can get a ride home straight away, if you, yeah, I mean, you are becoming, yeah, basically, we are becoming weaker psychologically as we are becoming weaker physically as a society. Because
the Chinese coaches told me very similar. They explained to me that it's very, very difficult for the tough sports like the wrestling, the weightlifting sports, the very physical sports, to get anybody out of the big cities anymore. They have to go to rural China in order to find athletes to recruit, because they can't get athletes out of cities because it's becoming too easy for them in their lives for those difficult sports. So they don't even bother. They have to recruit outside in rural China, where people still work and still have more difficult times.
So that is why I think we go back and we talk in our book about general physical tests that coaches and wrestling coaches should bring to schools. So partnership with the school and convincing PE teachers and principal of the school to have mandatory fitness tests and programs in place for everyone to toughen up physically and psychologically is a critical factor of success of wrestling clubs and their integration with school programs. There are some successful wrestling clubs, say Mad Dog Wrestling Club in Boston is a good example. They use the school facility, but most importantly, the coaches interact with school teachers and administration to develop better overall conditioned students, so that they can draw more physically, but also psychologically stronger participants.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we probably have enough here, definitely for this article. And then if we wanted to, I still think there's something left out that would be the actual fringe methodologies that wrestlers can use. The specific tools, because I think what you painted here, Peter, I think you did a one. I just love the way we looked at the macro level and the theories and philosophies that need to be applied, and then maybe jump to the micro level on the next one, and we'll hit, if that's something that Kyle wants to do, is we can talk about best practices in visualization for a wrestler, best practices in relaxation, best practices in, maybe some self-hypnosis. And we could also look at the MeBe Tough system that, and maybe some different things that we can discuss on just the fringe methodologies. But wrestling is such a psychological sport. I mean, and this is a big topic. but I think it's so mental, and the toughness component is of utmost concern, I think, for wrestling coaches and for the wrestling athlete. So I like how we painted it as how the coaches need to be thinking about integrating the moral, political components, the value system, the community, so important. We're in this together. We work together. You can only be as good as your partner, even though you might be on the mat because only one person can get that spot. Your support staff is so important. We can only we're a team. We're a unit. We can't do this by ourselves. Nobody can become a great wrestler without great people around them. That's one sport. It's impossible. How can you be by yourself and never be with anyone and be a great wrestler? It can't be done. So the community is so important, and that's a wrestling coach needs to be thinking about this because it's so hard. You have to have those other guys, and if you're not bringing them in and keeping them understanding that they're part of a big picture, it's impossible. You'll never develop good wrestlers. It's that community. I just think that that's so big is the macro level of just that understanding. If you want to get these athletes to be high level in a high performance model, I just think that's important. So